Emma had always carried her wallet like a quiet companion. It wasn't just a place to keep her money and ID. Inside were little fragments of her life, a photograph of her late mother, a note her niece once scribbled with crooked letters, and a folded card from a patient who had thanked her for staying past her shift. For her, it was more than leather, and stitching it was memory, proof of belonging, and a reminder of moments she held close. That evening, after a draining 12-hour shift at the hospital, Emma stumbled out into the dim parking lot. Her head throbbed from the endless rhythm of alarms, hurried footsteps, and whispered requests. She dropped into her car seat, too tired to notice that her wallet slipped from her bag onto the pavement. The night swallowed it quietly, leaving her to drive away unaware. It wasn't until hours later, at the corner store near her apartment, that she felt her chest tighten with panic. She reached into her bag, only to find empty space where her wallet should have been. Her heart sank, heavy as a stone falling into water. She retraced her steps in her mind, but the fatigue blurred everything. Each second that passed felt like another door closing, shutting out the possibility of finding it again. Emma sat in her car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. She thought of the bills tucked inside, the hospital ID she needed for her shifts, the photographs that couldn't be replaced. The weight of her day pressed down harder. It was on to only the loss of the wallet. It was the sense of losing trust in the world. She imagined someone finding it, leafing through its contents, and tossing it aside without care. Her mind replayed all the little moments of indifference she had witnessed lately. People cutting each other off in traffic, arguments in the hospital waiting room, patients without visitors left to face the night alone. Those images blended with her fear, painting a picture of a world too hurried, too selfish to pause for kindness. Emma whispered to herself that it was only a wallet, only things that could be replaced. Yet she felt the sting of hopelessness settle in her chest. It wasn't just the object she had lost, it was her fragile thread of faith in people. She leaned her forehead against the steering wheel, letting the silence of the empty parking lot wrap around her. Somewhere deep inside, she wondered if perhaps she had been wrong to believe that small kindnesses still had a place in the world. The night stretched on, and Emma sat in her apartment with a restless ache twisting in her chest. She had already called the hospital, retraced her drive in her mind, and even checked the parking lot once more. Nothing. The thought of filing reports, replacing cards, and explaining her carelessness to her supervisor only deepened her exhaustion. But underneath the frustration was something heavier, the quiet certainty that her wallet was gone forever. She made tea, hoping it would calm her nerves, but the mug sat untouched on the table. Her mind wouldn't let her rest. Every corner of her small apartment felt strangely unfamiliar, as if the loss had shifted something inside her. She caught herself glancing toward the door, though she had no reason to expect a knock. Still, she imagined what it would feel like if someone returned it, a stranger with enough kindness to drive through the night just to ease her heart. The thought almost made her laugh. People didn't do that anymore, she told herself. Hours slipped by. The city outside her window hushed into quiet, broken only by the occasional hum of passing cars. Emma paced the floor, replaying the last moments she had her wallet. She thought of her mother's photograph inside. That picture had survived years of moves, tucked safely behind a plastic sleeve, a frozen smile that always seemed to whisper comfort. The idea of it lying somewhere in the dirt or in careless hands made her stomach turn. At some point, fatigue gave way to stillness. Emma sat on the edge of her couch, staring at the soft glow of the lamp. Her thoughts drifted deeper, beyond the wallet itself. Maybe it wasn't just about losing things, it was about losing faith. She had seen too much hardness in people lately, and part of her had begun to believe that compassion was fading from the world. Tonight, that belief seemed confirmed. Then, just as she surrendered to the silence, a sound broke through, the faint but steady knock at her door. Emma froze, her breath caught in her chest. For a moment, she wondered if she had imagined it. Slowly, she rose and crossed the room, heart pounding in her ears. Another knock, gentle yet certain, filled the space between her doubts and a flicker of impossible hope. Her hand lingered on the doorknob, afraid to turn it, afraid the moment would collapse into something ordinary. But in that hesitation, she realized how deeply she wanted to be wrong about people, how much she longed for proof that kindness still lived quietly in the world. Emma opened the door, her breath catching as the hallway light spilled over a man she had never seen before. He looked to be in his late 50s, his jacket a little worn, his expression calm but tired. In his hand, held out like an offering, was her wallet. For a moment, Emma couldn't find her voice. Relief surged through her like warmth after a long winter chill. She reached out slowly, her fingers trembling as they brushed the leather. The wallet was whole, untouched, everything exactly as she had left it. The man gave a small smile, almost apologetic, and explained in a gentle voice that he had found it near the hospital parking lot. He had checked her driver's license, realized where she lived, and decided to drive several hours out of his way to return it. His words were simple, unadorned, but they carried a weight that made Emma's throat tighten. She tried to thank him, stumbling over her words, but he only shook his head as if to say it wasn't necessary. There was no demand for reward, no expectation of recognitions, the quiet dignity of someone who believed that doing the right thing was enough. As he turned to leave, Emma felt a rush of emotions she could hardly name. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper, the shattering of the hardened shell she had been carrying. In a single act, this stranger had lifted the heavy doubt that had settled in her heart. She realized then that kindness still lived in the world, not loud or flashy, but steady and real, carried in the choices of people who expected nothing in return. When the door closed, Emma sank onto her couch, clutching the wallet to her chest. Tears slid down her cheeks, not just because her belongings had been returned, but because her faith had been restored. She thought of her mother's photograph tucked inside, of her niece's scribbled note, of the patient's card. Somehow, it felt as though all those small pieces of her life had been guarded by the stranger's quiet act of goodness. That night, Emma didn't just recover a wallet, she recovered hope. She carried the memory of that man like a lantern in the dark, a reminder that the world was not as cold as it sometimes seemed. And with that thought, she finally allowed herself to rest, heart lighter than it had been in years. Sometimes, the smallest acts echo the loudest in our lives. A stranger's choice to care, to go out of his way for someone he didn't know, can mend the quiet fractures in another's heart. Emma's story reminds us that kindness is never wasted. It travels further than we imagine, reaching places we may never see. If this story touched you, take a moment to spread kindness in your own way. Share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the goodness still alive in the world.